Just as an old saying tells us, if you do not follow the rules, you cannot be made whole. As we look at moral precepts in Buddhism, there are only in one way or in some way similar to circular law that needs to be followed. These are their common points. Both provide a certain set of standards or guidelines for people to follow. Therefore, it can also be said that precepts are a necessary part of the structure of societies everywhere, because no society can hold together if its members refuse to follow its basic rules. And now let's go back to the paramita of discipline in Buddhism. And the very basic level guideline provided by the Buddhist precepts can be represented in the 5 precepts. And the 5 precepts consist of the following: no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, no intoxicants. In other words, all of the above 5 precepts tell us ways to stop harming other people. So from this you can see that initially Buddhist precepts do the same as the laws in society. It tells us there are certain things that we must not do, because once if we do them, not only will we hurt ourselves, we will also hurt other people. But of course, these are only the very basic guidelines of the Buddhist precepts. If we want to go a step higher in the Buddhist morality, we can see that it is something that can only be reached when we learn to follow these basic guidelines. So in other words, these are only the first step before we can step higher into following the Buddhist precepts. Nevertheless, there's something which you must remember as we talk about the precept of discipline. And it very simply tells us not to harm other people. But there's also one other very important thing. Besides the need to not harm other people, we have to take a step forward in the practice of the paramita of discipline, which is that step forward to help other people. In other words, not only do we refrain from doing evil, we also have to actively do good. These are the very important part of the discipline of the Buddhist precepts which we must follow. And by following the Buddhist precepts, we must not only look at the things that we cannot do. We cannot just rigidly following the rules that have been listed. In fact, we have to look for the real meaning of the Buddhist precepts. In ancient India, there was a very famous king called King Prasenajit. And he had a queen known as Mallika. And Lady Mallika not only took refuge in Buddhism, she also observed the 5 precepts: no killing, no stealing, no sexual conduct, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants. As she practiced very diligently, she had won a lot of love and respect not only from her king, but also from the people around her, for the reason that she was not only kind to them, but she was also very compassionate, and she was never proud or arrogant. And one day, King Prasenajit returned to his country from a war. As he was in a very bad mood, he also found the food provided by his imperial chef not good enough. This made him even more angry. Therefore, he made an order. He ordered for the chef to be sentenced to death. And upon finding this, Mallika tried to think of ways to save the chef. However, as it was the day that she would observe the 8 precepts, which was like a day of a monastic life, where she observed the precepts of no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, no intoxicants, and not using any sort of perfume, not watching dances and singing, not sleeping on luxurious beds, and not eating after noon. But as it was a matter of life and death. She had to do something, despite the fact that it was the day that she was supposed to observe the 8 precepts. Therefore, she came up away. She got herself all dressed up, put on some very nice perfume, and she had makeup on, and she wore all kinds of jewelries. Then she walked up to her king and said, "Welcome back. In order to welcome you back, I would like to join you in the banquet. And I would like to drink with you, I would like to watch the dances with you, and sing with you." But King Prasenajit said to her, "I thought today was the day that you were supposed to observe the 8 precepts. And you usually dressed up very simply. So why have you dressed up in such nice clothes with so much jewelry? You're even drinking. Why are you willing to break these precepts in order to accompany me and to entertain me?" Malika continued by saying, "Oh, this is all because I had wished to give you a warm welcome back. And therefore, please, Your Majesty, just make today a special day. The only thing I ask for is for a table full of beautiful food. Therefore, I would love for our imperial chef to cook for me." As soon as King Prasenajit heard that Malika wanted to eat something that is nice, and the food can only be produced by the imperial chef, he quickly ordered for the return of the imperial chef, and he quickly ordered for the cancellation of his sentence. After doing that, the king finally realized something. He realized that Queen Malika was willing to go to such extents because she had wanted to save a person's life. He felt a lot of respect in Malika's compassion and slowly started to become more willing in learning and practicing Buddhism. And in the end, he eventually became a devoted Buddhist himself. But the moral of this story is trying to tell us that the precepts are there. While it's there for the purpose of preventing evil, sometimes it's also like a guideline for teaching us to follow the right track, to grab onto the right rope when we're climbing mountains, so that we will not be subject to danger. In Malika's case, she was willing to break a precept by drinking so that she can save the chef's life. But her purpose was to save somebody's life, not for her own enjoyments. Therefore, her intentions were pure and compassionate. In other words, we must not stick rigidly to what the precepts lists, what the precepts tell us to do, nor should we ever use it as a set of ruler to measure other people's conduct and to decide whether these people's conducts are right or wrong. The real precepts are there for us to find our true self, to open up the truest side of ourselves, and to make our own personality more complete. And once we can do that, then we would be truly achieving the spirit and the purpose of observing precepts. And now let's get back to the six paramitas. As we talk about the paramita of discipline, it actually represents a higher level of Buddhist morality. So it's no longer just the 5 precepts. Why? Because the 6 precepts are a guideline for how we behave when we are actually attempting to help other people. Therefore, while the 5 precepts provides guidelines for us not to do anything that will hurt other people, the 6 paramitas tell us how we help other people. And it's once again, just simply stick to the very basic principles. As we talk about the precepts, they can be represented in the following very simple lines, which tells us, do no evil ever, do good always, purify your mind. These are the teachings of all Buddhas. Therefore, no matter what kind of precepts you are observing or following, these are the very basic things which you must follow and remember. And now, in order to bring benefit to sentient beings, we have to realize that it can only be done through the operation of cause and effect. Therefore, Buddhism teaches to use karmic laws in a way that helps sentient beings and avoid harming them. Remember, if our intentions are pure and good, the results of our actions will also be good for both ourselves and other people. And therefore, by sticking to cause and effect, we're also sticking to karmic law. And by sticking to karmic law, it will ensure that our intentions are pure and good. And it will also enable us to tackle moral questions the right way. And once we're able to do that, as we understand cause and effect, we will be fearless in front of moral questions because, once again, we will know how to deal with them. Let me give you an example in terms of ways to deal with moral questions. In one of the Buddha's previous lives, he had to kill an evil man on a boat to save the life of 500 innocent men. If you were in a situation, of course, you'll be faced with the dilemma of having to kill someone, no matter whether that person is evil or good. You will be faced with the question of having to deal with the consequences of killing somebody. But in the Buddha's situation, he realized that if he didn't kill one person, he will endanger the life of 500 other people. That's why he was courageous enough to stop this from happening by being willing to bear the consequence of his action in killing that one evil man. Of course, we're not saying that if we're killing out of good intentions, the effect of killing will not be there. It's just that once your intentions are pure, even though your actions may bear some negative consequences, at least they will not be as severe. So sometimes moral behavior must be proactive and courageous. And if we're certain that our intentions spring from love and compassion, then we will acquire a wisdom and confidence in dealing with such moral questions, especially the ones which you may never have faced before. Therefore, by learning to attend to the needs of other people, we free ourselves from the interferences of greed, anger, and ignorance that cloud our minds and prevent us from making good decisions. And as we talk about the 5 precepts, there will be times when people say that they are hesitant in observing the 5 precepts. Why? What if I break the precepts? Then I will have to bear the bad consequences. So what's the point of taking the precepts? Wouldn't it be just like placing more restrictions on myself? But as we look at this question, whether you are the one who asks the question or gets asked, you have to bear in mind that the same karmic law applies both to those who have vowed to follow the precepts and those who have not. So we cannot say that it's okay to kill somebody, it's okay to steal, it's okay to lie just because they have never taken the 5 precepts. Because the consequences will still manifest, no matter whether you have observed the precepts or not. It's just that the advantage that we gain from vowing to follow the 5 precepts lies in our increased awareness of what a moral transgression is and what we should do once we commit the transgression. Therefore, Buddhists should never be overly disturbed once they find themselves breaking a precept, because all we need to do is to take the right action after we realize we have violated a precept. At least having a repentant mind is still much better than an action that violates the precepts without feeling any regret or the fact that it is a wrong action to do. Therefore, in Buddhism, you don't need to be afraid of violating a precept, just as long as you know that it's wrong. And Buddhism also provides the following guidelines as to what we can do once we violate a precept. And it tells us that once we violate the precepts, first of all, we need to recognize what we have done. we have to recognize that this is something which we have done is wrong. And then we sincerely repent the act of doing something that is wrong. Thirdly, we make amends if there needs be. And fourthly, we honestly vow not to do it again. And last but not least, we will have to move forward without the burden of guilt or depression after repenting our wrongdoings. So, repenting is better than never realizing that it's wrong. There's no need to ever be afraid of having to observe the Buddhist 5 precepts.